to Inward Strides with Savni, where we dive into stories of transformation, resilience, and healing. Today's episode is special. It's Valentine's Day, a day often associated with love. But today, we are talking about a different kind of love, the love we cultivate for ourselves, for our healing, and for the journey that life takes us on. Our guest today is incredible woman, Anna. At just 35 years old, she faced an unimaginable challenge, a stroke. But instead of letting it define her, she turned it into a mission. How? You will find out soon. This conversation is about strength, self love, and the power of starting over. It's a reminder that no matter what life throws at us, we have the ability to rise, heal, and create a life we truly love. So, whether you are celebrating today with someone special or you are on a journey of self discovery, this episode is for you, me, and everyone. Let's dive in. Anna, thank you so much. It's so great to have you, and I'm truly grateful that you chose to be on this podcast, Inward Strides with Savni. And you have an incredible story. I got a lot of inspiration when I read about you and I saw some of your videos. So let me start with this. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you. That's such a lovely introduction as well. Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here with you, and thank you for having me on. But yes, I am very well today. Thank you. So I'm in the UK, so it's been a very drizzly and dull day here. So yeah, not the best, but I'm feeling good. So yeah, thank you.
Nice. Yeah, even here it's drizzling a little bit. I feel like California needs some rain, so it's good. So let's get into it. Okay, I want to know what was life like for you before the stroke and what kind of person you were at the age of 35.
Yeah, so my life before stroke was, I suppose, pretty normal. I was working full time. I worked for a opticians at the time, doing some resource planning for them. And yeah, life was pretty normal. I'm married, so I live with my husband, and we just like doing everyday stuff. Really, we love going out for walks and just chilling together, just spending time with family. So yeah, life was pretty normal. I will say that me as a person, like internally, there was maybe quite a bit of stuff going on internally for me. I think growing up, I've never been that comfortable with myself, and I always felt a little bit like probably that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't smart enough. You know, those general things that sometimes can crop up with that inner critic that we tend to have. And yeah, that voice was quite loud at times and quite difficult for me. But then I think it was when I was around, I think it was in my 20s when I started doing yoga, which kind of helped me to get probably into myself a little bit more, and kind of get into my well-being a little bit more. And yeah, just learning some of the things from yoga really kind of helped to start me on a path that was very much to do with my own inner world and my own inner healing. And yeah, it was very much like when I got to around 30, I think it was, that was when I started to really consider maybe becoming a yoga teacher and thinking kind of, oh, maybe I could do something with this. And I think going on that yoga teacher training that I did was just open my mind up to so much more of yoga and what it can offer as I suppose a holistic practice. And I think that, you know, I was kind of really starting to feel like, yes, this is the right path for me. I'm feeling lots better about myself internally and feeling lots better about my body and all of those sort of things that I'd struggled with, that I suppose a lot of women struggle with, you know, comparing yourself to others and that type of thing. It's quite common. So yeah, I think my path really started to change when yoga came into my life and became more serious in my life, I suppose. And it really started to help me to learn to love myself a little bit more. And I'm not saying that, you know, it was all rainbows and butterflies and life was amazing and I was feeling really great about myself, because there was still, you know, there's still lots of things that I wanted to work on. There was progress that I was seeing, and I was starting to feel so much better about myself and my body. And then I hit 35, and that's when I had my stroke, and everything kind of changed.
So I want to, like, because you mentioned about you had your own limiting belief, I'm not enough. And so many out there have this. Even I had it, and that pops up sometimes. And the only difference now with me is I'm aware that I have that limiting belief. But I want to take, because I truly believe that all these limiting beliefs actually starts from childhood with whatever surroundings. So do you think, like, how was your childhood, and do you think like you took some of the limiting beliefs or some great things from your childhood, that what you did till you're the age of 35?
Yes, I think it definitely does come down to your childhood. I think it did with me. Like I had, like, you know, my family is just awesome. They're amazing. There were times when I felt like I wasn't good enough. Like I tried to do something and it just wasn't quite enough. So yeah, that's definitely where I think that these beliefs have come from. And, you know, I think that there's lots of things that we don't ever really get taught when we're growing up, and when, you know, as we're going into like adulthood. And I think a lot of people, even in adulthood, still don't really realize that actually when we think about all of these things, our thoughts aren't actually fact. They're just these thoughts that kind of pop up. And so these thoughts that come along in your head saying, you know, this inner critic that you've got, or whatever it is, that says that you're not good enough or that you can't do this, because they've been playing in your head for so long, it just seems like, oh yeah, okay, that's true, and it just continues to go. But until you start to realize that actually those thoughts aren't fact and you can do something about them, then it's just going to continue to play. And that's kind of what happened with me. It just continued to play and play and play, that it kind of just, yeah, made me feel like that, yeah, there was some things that, you know, even doing my yoga teacher training, it took me a long time to kind of say out loud to people that this was something that I wanted to do. And it was my husband that encouraged me to do it, because he realized how passionate I was about it. And it was just that I still felt like, oh gosh, well, I've always had this narrative in my head, oh, I'm not very good at learning things, and I'm just going to get it wrong, and I'm not going to be able to do this. Like, I've got to do an exam, and I'm rubbish at exams, and all of these things that I'd always believed about myself came from when I was younger. You know, I specifically remember a time when I was at college, and there was this tutor that just clearly didn't like me very much. And, you know, he told me that I was never going to do anything and I was going to fail his exam. And he made me feel really small in one of his lessons because I didn't know the answer to something. And so I think you take on these things from your experiences in your early life, and they kind of just come out in your later life as well. So yeah, it was very much like some stuff from my past definitely got brought forward into the everyday as well. But now I've realized that actually, like I say, thoughts aren't fact, and you can, you know, do something about those thoughts that are there. It's definitely helped me.
So looking back, do you think there were any warning signs that you were getting, that about the stroke or something is not well in your body?
So it's funny because myself and my husband, after after it had happened, in the immediate aftermath of it, we spent so long like trying to rack our brains thinking, was there any sign or lead up to this at all, you know? And it was just, we've literally thought so long and hard about it, and there was literally nothing. There was no sign or anything that I thought at the time kind of led into this. And, you know, I spoke to one of the doctors at the hospital, and he was just like, you know, sometimes you're just unlucky, and it's just one of those. And I was like, right, okay. Yeah, you know, they did lots of tests and things to figure out why did happen, and we found out why in the end anyway. But yeah, there was nothing in the days leading up to it. Everything was fine, and then just one moment everything wasn't.
Yeah. So, can you take us to that moment, the day that everything changed?
Yeah, so it was a Friday morning, the 12th of March 2021, at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's not something I'll ever forget. Well, my husband had got up at 10 to 6 for work, and I was getting up at 6 anyway as well. And I got up. I was going to do a workout before work. So I'd gone to the loo, come back to get my workout gear on, and everything felt fine. Still felt okay when I was at the loo. Everything was fine, and I came back into my bedroom to get my workout gear on, and that's when I noticed something was a little bit off. I was trying to pull my sports bra over my head, and I noticed that my left arm just felt really weird, like it was quite heavy. And I was like, oh, that's a bit odd. And I thought, oh, maybe I've just stood up a little bit too fast, and I've got a bit of a head rush. And sometimes my limbs feel a bit weird when I do that sometimes. So I was like, oh, it's probably just that. And then as I was putting my shorts on, I realized my left leg felt weird. And I was like, oh, no, this feels a bit odd. And I realized that my head was starting to feel a little bit fuzzy. And so I sat on the edge of my bed, and luckily, I'm just so lucky here that my husband hadn't actually gone to work yet. He was about 5 minutes away from going. And I said that I didn't feel right. And that's when I really started to panic, because my words didn't come out properly. So I think when people say about having a stroke, there's this thing that obviously one of the symptoms is that your speech is slurred. I suppose I thought this, and I think maybe other people do. They kind of think when your speech is slurred, it's a little bit like when you're drunk, if you've had a drink, and it's really not. It's not like that at all. It's like you can't physically get like I was trying to force the words out of my mouth, but the muscles just weren't moving properly. And yeah, so I really panicked at that point. And my husband came in, took one look at me, and just called our emergency services and said, I think my wife's having a stroke. Luckily, in the UK, we have an advert that's on TV sometimes through our NHS, and it's about stroke. And it gives you the signs of a stroke and what to do if you notice someone's got these signs of a stroke. And weirdly, that advert had been doing the airtime not long before I had my stroke. So I think that was quite prominent in my husband's head when he looked at me and was just like, yeah, like even though we thought strokes only happen to older people, he was just like, yeah, I think my wife's having a stroke. And he was like, he knew that I was able to hear him, and he was like, I didn't want to panic you, but I obviously he had to say to them because they needed to know. But I was also thinking, oh my God, yes, I'm having a stroke, because I was fully aware of everything that was happening, which was even more scary. Being fully aware of my left side just deteriorated quite quickly. When my husband was on the phone to the emergency services, they asked you to do some things, so to raise your arms in front of you. And my left arm just wouldn't move at all by that point. And it's quite disconcerting to look down at your arm and be willing it to move, but it doesn't do anything. So that was really quite scary. And they asked you to recite a tongue twister to see how your speech is, and I couldn't really repeat that either. So they said, obviously we'll get an ambulance on its way to you, and I think the ambulance was maybe about 20 minutes, so really very, very good, because again, what we didn't know at the time was that time is really important when you have a stroke, to get medication within the first 4 hours. So that was really lucky. I mean, it felt like an absolute lifetime waiting for them, and I think within that time, like me and my husband, obviously he'd done on the phone to them, so we were kind of left on our own. And I think I honestly thought I was going to die, because I didn't know anything else about strokes other than that old people have them and that they die from them. So yeah, I really did. I kept trying to say sorry to my husband. I mean, I'm not sure what I was saying sorry for, but maybe sorry for putting him through this, and if I was going to die, leaving him. I loved him, and I was just in a real panic, I think, at that time. And my husband just offered me such a gift in that time, and he was just like, use your yoga breathing. And so then I was like, okay, let me try and switch into this. And he was like, when he said use your yoga breathing, all he meant was, just try and deepen your inhalations and lengthen your exhalations, just do that deep breathing. And actually it really calmed me in that moment. And it doesn't take away the fact that this is really terrifying, and it doesn't take away the fact that I'm having a stroke, but it gave me a small amount of control in that moment, that this was something that I could control, and I could calm myself a little. And that just really, really helped me, and is something that I always just think on and remember about that morning. And then after, I'd been trying to do that for a while to calm myself, the paramedics came. They said that they weren't sure if it was a stroke or not. They said it could be something else. So, we'll get you to hospital. Unfortunately, it was 2021. So we were still kind of in COVID a little bit. So my husband couldn't come to the hospital with me, which was really, really difficult, especially for my husband to just kind of be there, like, not sure, not knowing whether he was going to see me or not again, because again, at this point, we just had no idea what was going to happen. So that was really difficult. And I got to hospital, had a CT scan, had some medication, went on to the stroke ward, and the doctors said that they were going to do an MRI scan, hopefully later that day. And they thought I'd had a migraine. They didn't think it was a stroke at all, because they were like, you've got no risk factors at all. You're fit, you're healthy. Obviously being younger as well. They were like, and I do suffer from migraines as well. So they were like, we think it's just a migraine. And so that made me feel better, actually, being like, oh, okay, maybe I've just been really dramatic. I don't know, I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, great, perfect. And by this point, some of my movement had come back in my left side. My speech had started to come back. So I was feeling a lot better at this point, and feeling more reassured, that I was thinking, oh, okay, well, if it's a migraine, then I can deal with this, that's okay. So I went for my scan, and got put into a room on my own, which was quite nice to have my own room. And I just spent the most of the day on the phone to people, just explaining kind of what had happened, on the phone to my family, to my husband, lots and lots of video calls whilst I was waiting for the results, and just trying to kind of move around a little bit, because my movement was starting to feel better. It was still not perfect. I was really lucky that this happened to me, because a lot of people, some people are left with really physical disabilities after having a stroke. So I knew I was really lucky at this point. And later that day, the doctor came to speak to me, and she told me that I had indeed had a stroke, which kind of knocked the wind out of me and kind of pulled the rug from underneath me, I think, because I spent most of that day thinking, oh, okay, well, it's just a migraine, because that's what the doctors have told me. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, actually, no, sorry, we were wrong. It was a stroke. So it was kind of very hard to have to go through finding out that it was a stroke, when you've kind of, I don't know, maybe been lulled into a false sense of security first. It was difficult. I think I just cried when she told me, because I was just scared that it was going to happen again. And that's one thing that I said, is it going to happen again? What's going to happen now? There was just so many different questions, and I didn't really take in anything that she said. And I was on my own, and I was then going to have to phone my husband and tell him, and tell my family. And I remember I was having my dinner, and I tried to phone my mum and tell my mum, and I was just in absolute tears trying to eat my dinner and tell my mum that I'd had a stroke, and she was crying, I was crying. It was a bit of a mess. But it was just difficult. But then another doctor came to see me, and he was the one that said, sometimes these things do just happen. We're going to try and figure it out for you, though, and figure out what's happened. And he was like, sometimes with younger people, they sometimes have a hole in their heart. So that was kind of another layer of anxiety to think about. And I was like, right, okay. So there's like layer on layer at this point.
Yeah, I'm just like, wow, there's like so much layer, as you said. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, really unexpected for him to say that. But then weirdly, I started thinking about things, and I started thinking about my health, and I started thinking about different things that we do. And I thought me and my husband had a chat, and just from what you were saying earlier, and the question you asked about if there was anything that had any signs of this happening. And I still think, no, there wasn't. I do get out of breath easily, or I did get out of breath easily before my stroke. And we did wonder if I was like, oh, well, if they're saying I've got a hole in my heart, then maybe that might have something to do with my breathing and getting out of breath easily. And, so we were like, wonder if maybe it's that. I mean, I spoke to many doctors since, and they say that there isn't really that much evidence to do with that. But it does make me think, and there's a lot of other people that do kind of think similar and do have similar issues with their breathing and do end up having a hole in their heart as well. So, whether it is something that is there or not, I don't know. But that was kind of our thought process around it, was like, oh, maybe if it is that, then that might, it might be because of that. So yeah, it was very much like the next 4 days was kind of me just being in hospital on my own, and just doing physio to get my movements back. Like my arm, the only way I can describe my arm is that it felt like when I moved it, it felt like I was moving it through water. So the movement just didn't feel natural and didn't feel automatic. Like what everyone's movements, you see it, I think until you lose some of your movement, you don't realize how, I suppose, habitual our bodies are, and just how all of these things just happen. So yeah, it felt a bit weird, but yeah, like I said, I spent the next 4 days in hospital just doing recovery things, and yeah, being on lots of video calls, like I say, because I was on my own, which was just hard, to be on your own when you're going through something like that. It's just, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, so definitely this is a roller coaster ride, like from the time it happened till you were in the hospital and recovering from it. So just few things I want to clarify. So it did indeed, they said like there is a chance that there's a hole in the heart.
Yeah, and it turned out there was a hole in my heart as well.
It was okay.
Yeah, so I had some tests done, and it, yeah.
And your family, your husband has played such a vital role in, calming you down during such a situation. It's really important to have that, warmth around you when certain things like this happen. So when did you realize that healing was not just about physical but emotional and psychological too? I read somewhere in your bio, wow, this is I definitely want to ask her this.
Yes, it's so funny, I think, when you think about a stroke, because you think about the physical signs. Like I say, we have these adverts in the UK that regularly do the rounds, and it shows the physical signs of having a stroke, and all of that people do get left with physical disabilities. And that's really, really difficult for people. I've spoke to lots of stroke survivors over the years, and that's massively difficult for people to be left with a physical disability. But what really interests me is the psychological side of it, and the fact that when I was signed off from my stroke consultant last year I was signed off. Before I was signed off, I said to him that I was still having a few issues with some health anxiety, and that I wanted to speak to a specific psychologist, or a specific neuropsychologist, that deals with stroke and other conditions like stroke. And he was like, yes, perfect. He was like, this is great. He says, I always hear, he says, I do hear from people. He says, especially people that have had a really good physical recovery, they tend to need more help psychologically. And that's, could be many different reasons why. Because of my yoga stuff that I do, I'm pretty self-aware of what my problems were and where I needed help. And he was like, this is great, you've got really good insight. I'm more than happy to refer you to a neuropsychologist if we had one. It was like, he reeled off a whole list of people within the hospital that they have for stroke recovery, and they were all physical things. So rehabilitation specialists and speech and language therapists and all of those types of things that you might need, but they didn't have a neuropsychologist for people that need psychological help after having such a traumatic experience, which I just found really baffling. And my consultant, bless him, he was amazing, and he was like, I'm going to find someone for you, don't you worry. But I just think that when you go through something like that, you have to grieve. You grieve for your old self, your old life. And that's a lot to go through. And I think that it's very traumatic. And I think that people need to be able to talk to someone about this, and not just talk as well. There's, trauma's held in your body as well. You need to be able to move. And even if you've got a physical disability, doing some small gentle movements can really help to shift things as well in your body. So it's very much like a holistic approach, I suppose, to it. And it's just this thing with the psychological side of things. It's really difficult, and it's really hard for some people to talk about, And I think that it's anything to do with, I suppose, mental health, which as a society we are getting much, much better at talking about, but there's still some work to do with it, and it's just a prime example of the fact that my hospital didn't have someone for me to talk to straight away, and I think there's lots of people that are on waiting lists to speak to a neuropsychologist because there aren't as many of them around, and these are really, really important for people that have gone through stuff like this. And I just think, for me, when I first was in hospital, the doctors, when they were doing the assessment and everything, they asked you what you do, told them what my job was. I said I was also a yoga teacher. And one of the doctors said to me when I was saying my anxiety to one of the days was just really, really through the roof, really high. She was like, "Oh, do some meditation." And I was like, "Oh, right, yes, okay, yes. Perfect, I'll do some meditation." But it was so hard. I had so many thoughts going around my head and I was so worried that it was so difficult to sit in silence with myself. With all of this stuff going on, it's just sometimes that's not practical. And so it wasn't until when I got home and I spoke to a yoga teacher that was a trauma-informed yoga teacher. And he said to me, actually, when you've been through a traumatic experience, sometimes sitting with yourself in silence isn't actually the best option. And he was like, try, within the realms of what you can do and what your doctors have said that you can do with movement, try and move your body a little bit as a moving meditation so that you're feeling into your body again and you're getting into that, you're getting into trust in your body again, because I completely lost all trust in my body. I felt like my body had betrayed me by doing this. It's getting back into that and getting that trust back, and that's where everything kind of started to fall a little bit more into place for me, was actually using my yoga as this moving meditation to just be with myself a little bit more. Just allowed me just that bit of, I suppose, softness with myself, rather than thinking that my body was against me and that, oh my God, this is what my body's done to me. It was building up that trust. And I think that kindness that I've always struggled with giving myself started to kind of come in a little bit. And then it was, I did more training on trauma because I found it so fascinating. And now I am a trauma-informed yoga teacher as well, that learning about trauma, how it comes and sits in your body, when you've been through something like this, and how you can work through it. Just the whole process of learning all of this really allowed me to definitely be kinder to myself. and just to be able to sit with these feelings, this
Mm.
anxiety, and know that it wasn't all of me. It was just, there was something just inside me that was feeling a bit anxious, and
Mm.
that I could kind of say hello to it and kind of acknowledge it, and have this a little bit of dialogue with it to kind of like, okay, how am I feeling? Yeah, there's a little bit of anxiety there. Okay, what do I need? What can I do? And it's just those simple sort of questions that I learned from this trauma informed training course that I did, that I could
Mm.
then start to weave into my everyday to help my psychological recovery, because that course really blew my mind on what I learned about trauma, and also
Mm.
it helped me through my own trauma, but then also helped me then kind of be able to help other people as well. Yeah.
So, as I'm listening to you, was the anxiety coming from being angry with your body, or do you think the anxiety was coming up from there, that, oh, my body, how did that happen and why me? And then
Mm.
anxiety popped up?
I think the anxiety was from thinking about having another stroke. I think the anxiety came from being scared.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It came from being scared. For me, I've never thought why me, because
Okay.
my thought is, why not me? I'm no more special than anyone else, and these things do happen in life. It's unfortunate that these things happen, but they do, and they can happen to anyone. As I now know, you don't need to be an older person to have a stroke. If you've got a brain, then you can have a stroke. You've just got to I suppose, understand risk factors and all of that sort of stuff to kind of mitigate it. But I think, yeah, anxiety it really stemmed from just being scared, and I think, and of having my stable world kind of really shook, and to the uncertainty of what's going to happen going forwards. It was about a month after I had my stroke that I found out about the hole in my heart as well. So we knew at some point that would need to be fixed.
Yeah.
So there was lots of uncertainty, lots of stress, as in like, oh my god, I'm so stressed out, but lots of extra added worry and stress in that I felt responsible for, that I'd brought this into our household. Like, my husband was so worried for like years after, running up to my heart surgery. And my husband said that was literally like the most stressed he'd ever been in his life, because he was so worried. Like, even though it's quite a routine procedure, but it's still heart surgery. So having brought all of this worry and stress and into our environment and into our world, there was so much guilt as well. And I think that lots of stroke survivors, or any other type of, if you go through any other type of illness, maybe like cancer or anything like that, you tend to think about what it does to the people around you as well. As a stroke survivor, and as lots of other stroke survivors will know, it doesn't just happen to you. Like, yes, the stroke happens to you, but it also happens to your family. And having that on top of everything else is again hard, and that's again to do with that psychological recovery and that kindness that you're offering to yourself, to say that it wasn't your fault that this happened. It's taken therapy, definitely therapy, for me to kind of get to a point where to not feel guilty that this has come into our lives. It's funny, I remember looking at, a few days after I'd come home from hospital, I was looking at a photo of me and my husband, and it was just like a stupid selfie that we took in the garden, and it was, I think, the weekend before I had my stroke. And I was looking at that, and I just kept looking at it and kept thinking, oh my god, like, look at us, like, there was no worries, no stress, that's not true. Like, that's just what my mind was telling me, but that we did have stress and worries beforehand, but it was just in my head, it was like, oh, we had no worries, it was all great and sunshine and butterflies and whatever, because I think I was looking at everything with rose tinted glasses on, as like everything in my life was perfect before, and then now look at everything so messed up, and yeah, there's lots to kind of deal with. Yeah, you put so much pressure onto yourself because of that, and so much guilt, which is difficult.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that openly. I saw some of your videos on stroke survivor yoga. How did that practice start? Was it influenced from the trauma, or was it something that you come up with your own the practice?
Mm. Yeah, so it was kind of, I started obviously practicing yoga again, literally a few
Mm.
days after I come out of hospital, after I'd spoken to that trauma-informed yoga teacher. So I started coming back to my own practice. I remember one morning I was practicing outside in my garden, which is my favourite thing to do. Yoga outside and the sun, spot on. It's my favourite thing. And it just, it felt so nice to be kind of practicing and just going through some gentle movements. And my movements were predominantly floor based. I didn't really do any standing postures or anything like that. It was just moving, just how my body wanted to kind of move and just flow, just real gentle. And my practice just kind of progressed, from there again, just built myself up with my strength and so when I felt that I wanted to focus more on stroke survivors and helping some stroke survivors through their recoveries, I started to think about how my yoga practice had helped me through, and the different things that had helped me. And so I created some practices that I thought would be helpful for people, different things that would be helpful. So there was lots of, like in the practices that I do, lots of loving kindness practices in there, movements that kind of really hug yourself, offering yourself that kindness. There's mantra in there that I've used as well sometimes, because simple mantras like I am whole is something that can feel quite jarring to a stroke survivor that maybe can't use their left arm or their right arm or their leg, or to feel whole is what people want. And so actually to know that you already are whole without everything else. And so that mantra, and so, some different mantras that I used myself. So yeah, there was different things that I kind of put into it. I did read a book that was to do with stroke and yoga, which kind of gave me some ideas and things to think about. So it was all things that I kind of looked at with what I was doing for myself personally. So I was like, it was really nice to see kind of, oh, okay, so I'm on the right path with with what I'm doing. So that's good to know, because I think there's not much out there, or there wasn't much out there for stroke survivors and yoga. There's definitely quite a bit out there now. I know quite a few yoga teachers that have had strokes that are doing similar things, and so, which is great to see what people are doing. So yeah, it was really based on what I'd kind of used in my own practice to build myself back up, is what I've used in the videos that I've done as well.
Yeah, those videos were so powerful. I definitely did one and I felt so nice after
Oh,
doing it. So thank you for putting out this wisdom out there for people to watch and follow and enjoy that video. It's really beautiful. And what you said is also so beautiful. So have you done your own affirmations? Like, do you now have your own affirmations that you think that help you to get through your day, and it also helps the people you are helping with to heal?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I always use to myself is like what I said earlier is thoughts aren't facts. So my
Mm,
thoughts aren't facts is something that I use quite a lot
mm,
to myself. And I also use the mantra, I am whole, I am peace. I use a lot to really ground me. I'm very much into my garden, and I love walking around barefoot in my garden, and I'll do like a little circuit around whilst I'm reciting a mantra to myself, or I am grounded, those types of things, because I feel like there's so much going on out in the world that we really need to kind of bring it back into ourselves, and just to really ground ourselves in that, I suppose, in that kindness for ourselves. So for me, I use, there's definitely a couple of mantras there that I use on a daily basis. Yeah, I just really love the way that they can just really calm your mind. Yeah, mantras are a great thing to use for anyone that doesn't use them. The mantras, affirmations, anything like that is great.
Wow. So, when did you decide that you want to help other women to to navigate through their challenges? And I love the name of your program, Life Reimagined. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
So Life Reimagined just came to me actually whilst I was over this last Christmas period. I was ill, I had flu, and I was running through a couple of things, and that kind of came to me then. So I'd been with my work, I've done a few different things. So originally, when I first started with my yoga journey and my yoga teaching, I did just general teaching on Zoom, or when we could in my local Scouts hut in the village that I live in. So just doing like general classes, which were good. I loved the people that came. I had like a nice little community, which was nice. Obviously, then I had my stroke, and things obviously changed. I took some time off from teaching, and when I came back, I still was doing the same thing, but I wanted to do a little bit more, and I knew that I wanted to do a little bit more for stroke survivors. So I focused heavily on working with stroke survivors for a while, and then I was also thinking, like, over this past year for me, it's been probably another year of quite big growth. I've like I said, I've had therapy, and I figured out a lot of things, a lot of internal things for me. Because I think some people think these things happen overnight, and like this has been nearly a 4-year journey for me now since my stroke, and every year something new seems to kind of come up, and that I can kind of think about and work on. And last year I was really working on my inner world, and thinking about those thoughts and those habitual patterns that I have, and lots of other different things. And a lot of things that came up were things that I would hear from other women, and it just made me realise that there's some things that as women we go through, that not that men don't go through awful things as well, and really challenging times, but there is a difference between how things are related to women and men. And so it really got me thinking about women and how we do things, and how a lot of women don't feel good enough, that there's that comparison, like we're pitted against each other quite a lot in society. So that where that comparison always comes in. And there's just lots of little things that I was kind of thinking about, that was like, oh, I feel like I felt compelled to do something with this. And so that's when I started to think about, actually, it's not just about people that have had a stroke. It's about people that have had any form of, life-changing situation that they've gone through, whether that's a bereavement, or whether that's, like I said earlier, going through cancer, or going through some other health challenge, or going through like life-changing moments. And sometimes it can be really brutal, this change that happens to us. It can be really harsh, if 1 minute, like with me, 1 minute you're okay, the next minute you're having a stroke and you're not. That's a change that happens instantly. And I think that when we, change happens all the time as we get older, menopause, perimenopause, that, wrinkles, whatever, they all come gradually, and we're built, you build up to that. Whereas sometimes when you go through health challenges or bereavements or anything like that, it's really brutal and sudden, and I think it's really jarring for people. And I think women especially get caught in this cycle of wanting to get back into their old way of life, because we possibly can't see anything else for ourselves other than what that was. And we possibly are the one that is the caregiver for everyone. That's usually a role that the woman takes on. There's just lots of things that I was kind of thinking about, and thinking that actually helping women to know that they can reimagine their life, and it doesn't have to be how it was before. And I'm not saying that, people might want their life to go back to how it was before, and that's completely fine. If your life was great and and if you didn't have anything that you wanted to change, but maybe there's just something small, and I've just been writing about this earlier today. I think we think of change as this big massive thing that we need to do, and actually it doesn't need to be that big. So if you think about, can I just take a moment with myself? Mm-hmm. Can I allow myself to take this moment and just, hand on heart, how am I feeling today? What's going on? And give yourself that space to see how you are, to check in with yourself, to, ask yourself these questions, like, how am I feeling? Like, what can I do? What do I need? Those just really simple questions can have a real massive impact on your life when you actually just break it down. So it's not about you need to make this big massive change, like, oh my god, I'm going to change career, I'm going to do this, do that, I'm going to go traveling, I'm going to quit everything. It doesn't have to be that massive. But to reimagine your life, you need to slow down first, and you need to pause, and you need to look at how your life is and how you're feeling. And if there's something there that doesn't feel right or doesn't feels a little bit off, then that's where we can work on something and see kind of where it is that's feeling off and what it is that's feeling off. And, I can ask, like, as a coach, I know that people have the answers within them. I just ask them some questions to get to those, for them to think differently and to get to those answers that they need, because they've got all the answers within them. It's just me kind of helping them out a little bit with a different way of looking at things.
Wow, that's a powerful technique. You're helping women find their own voice, their own strength, their own power.
Yeah.
That's such a great work you're doing. What's the biggest mindset shift that helped you move forward while serving the women to navigate through their challenges, or through your work, or through what has happened with you?
Yeah, so for me, the mindset, the real thing that's really helped me is to know that definitely my thoughts aren't fact. I know I keep repeating that, but that's so important to me, and it's such an important message for people, I think.
Yeah.
But also that there's all of these different parts that you have within you, and I think for me, it's that what really helped me was to know that these different parts, they're just there and they're just trying to protect you. They're just, there's these different parts that can crop up, like I've mentioned before about comparing yourself, like your inner critic.
Yeah.
And it's if you break it down, there's I don't know if you've heard of it. There's a system called the internal family system. I think it's by Richard Schwartz, I think his name is, and it's really fascinating. He's got a book called No Bad Parts, which really helped me to look at my internal world, and I think that's where everyone needs to kind of look at, is their internal landscape, and that's helped me to shift my mindset so much with how I think about things and how I think about myself. And I think when you think about all of these parts that we have within us, like say we've got this inner critic, actually when you break it down and look at it and, I suppose have a dialogue with it, it's actually just trying to protect you, to be like, oh, I'm not going to go and do that because I'm not going to be very good at it. It's trying to protect a younger version of yourself. That younger version of me that got told from that tutor at college that I wasn't good enough and I wouldn't be able to do the exam and this type of thing. Yeah. It's trying to protect that younger version of me by not putting me out there, by saying like, oh no, I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to be good at it. When you look at it like that, and it's like, actually it's just trying to protect that younger part of me, and it doesn't realize that I'm actually older now and I've done more things and I'm hopefully wiser. Once you realize that, you can start to work with it a little bit more and realize and understand, and then when you do have your inner critic coming up, or anything, one of your protector parts coming up, you can just, you can sit with it and just say, it's okay, I'm here now and I'm in this position now that it is okay for me to do these things and I can put myself out there. So that's really the sort of stuff that I think about a lot now, and has really altered how I approach things with my life, and that's some of the things that I speak with my clients about, and help them to kind of realize as well. And I think all of this stuff, it's kind of just giving people a little bit more knowledge about these sort of things, because like I say, no one ever tells you that your thoughts aren't facts or anything like that. No one talks about these sort of things when you're younger, or they didn't when I was younger anyway. I think, like I say, there's a lot more out there now. That's the things that are really making me think differently about myself and my life now.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And we are at the end of our podcast. Anna, this was such an inspiring conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your journey so openly. And for those who are listening, if this episode resonated with you, please make sure to connect with Anna. I will put down her website description and everything about her, and do check out her resources. And if you know someone who might need to hear this, share this video, share this episode with them. Until next time, take care, everyone. And thank you, Anna. I'm truly grateful again for being on this podcast.
Thank you for having me.